Weight loss really comes down to a calorie deficit. So when you're eating all of these whole foods, you're filling up on bulk and volume. You feel satisfied, but you're actually at a calorie deficit because whole foods, like you said, are so good for you. They're full of nutrition, fiber, water, bulk, all these things that trigger satiation in your brain, but they're lower in calories. Whereas if you're eating loads of processed food, they're low in nutrition and high in calories, and you have to eat a lot more to fill up. So when you're consuming all of these whole foods, you're full and you're satisfied, but you're eating less calories than you have been. So your body is burning up that fat that you have stored. And it's a beautiful process, especially when you don't, like I didn't have to count calories to get to where I am. That was magic for me. And there's nothing wrong with counting calories. I think it's an excellent tool and it helps a lot of people. But this is a great way to manage weight loss without having to count calories.
Welcome my guest, Kiki Nelson. She is an author and speaker known as Plantiful Kiki on social media. Kiki was in her 30s when she was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, at risk for heart disease and stroke, when she knew she had to take control of her health. While a few programs had previously helped her lose some weight, it took going all in on plants to resolve her health issues and maintain her weight loss. When Kiki adopted a plant-based, low-fat diet, she lost 70 pounds and reversed her risk for diabetes and heart disease. Now she helps others do the same in dropping the weight and regaining their health. Kiki is a co-creator of Eat More, Weigh Less program, which has now helped thousands lose weight and keep it off. Now she welcomes her newest book, Plantifully Lean, 125 plus simple and satisfying plant-based recipes for health and weight loss. Kiki shares the recipes and 4-week meal plan that were key to her success, and that will help anyone lose weight and reclaim their health. Welcome to another episode on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast. I have the honor of bringing on Plantiful Kiki, known on all the social medias and also wildly popular on YouTube, but it's Kiki Nelson. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you. I look forward to going into your journey and just what has helped you lose 70 pounds of weight. And that was after so many things not working for you. So you finally found something that was actually sustainable that you've been doing for, I believe, for over 4 or 5 years. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just so happy to go into that journey. But before we get into that, of course, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. So let's first go into sharing what led you into taking a different approach to your health and your weight loss. And what was that catalyst? Because as I just mentioned, nothing was working before.
Yeah. So I had, spent most of my life struggling with my weight, and I had been pre-diabetic for about 10 years. And I had gone to a doctor's appointment just to check up. And she called me just like a few hours later, or maybe it was like a day later because she had my blood work. So she called me and she was like, you need to lose at least 40 pounds like now. She's like, you can't keep doing this. She's like, you're almost diabetic. You have high blood pressure, high triglycerides. I was having so many hormonal problems. I had like cystic acne, and I was just beside myself because it wasn't for a lack of trying. I had been trying forever, and I always considered myself health conscious because I was always interested in a healthy lifestyle and healthy living. And so I thought I was doing something that was going to be healthy for me, but I basically it was being put against a wall finally and being told that like if I didn't take care of it now, the things were just going to continue to get worse. But I felt powerless to change it. I didn't know what to do anymore because I had done everything. And so I had just been venting to a friend about all of this. And she was like, I heard of this doctor that helps people heal their bodies and lose weight. eating potatoes. And I was like, there's no way. Like, I'm Latina. I'm pre-diabetic. Diabetes is real for my people. I can't just like start eating a bunch of carbs. But I was desperate. So I literally got off the phone with her, ran to Barnes and Noble and picked up Dr. John McDougall's book, The Starch Solution. And I read it in a day. And I was just mind blown because he had 40 plus years of experience helping people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, reverse their health issues, lose weight, and reverse things like diabetes with carbs. And I just couldn't believe it. And she was smart. My friend was smart because she didn't tell me it was a vegan, approach, a plant-based approach. So by the end of the book, I was like, I cannot believe I'm seriously considering going plant-based. But I just was so convinced by the end of the book, and the fact that this doctor had so much experience in so many years, and I'd gotten on his website and saw just, testimony after testimony of people losing huge amounts of weight and reversing their health issues, that I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So I just jumped in and went for it.
Amazing. Okay. So one thing that you mentioned, it's kind of like you had that breaking point, that point where it's like enough is enough, and where a doctor had to literally look you in the face, like, you cannot live this way anymore. Like, something needs to change. And I think that's the point that people do make the change, when it's like you had that breaking moment where you're like, I have to do something, like, and you have to find the solution. And I think, luckily, because your friend jumped in, she was able to give you something that you could align yourself with. And I think one of the things, and I just released an episode this week, and it was about basically stop the dieting, because it's really creating a lifestyle approach. And I think with diets in general, and I will go into what you learned and whatnot, but diets in general aren't sustainable. It's creating a lifestyle plan. And I think what you learned and what you're doing still today, it's not, I would consider, to my understanding from what I've learned so far, it's more a lifestyle plan. And that's what's been able to maintain the weight loss that you did have, the 70 pounds you lost, and then maintaining. And I think that's the one thing that is so, so key. It's like so many people that need to lose weight, especially when they have serious health issues, it's like they usually gravitate to like this diet. Oh, the keto works, or the low carb, or plant-based, or whatnot. But it's really creating a lifestyle approach that you could sustain, opposed to jumping to the next thing and the next thing, because that's really what's not going to create lasting change. And so I think this is so important. And so let's talk about this. So you learned about this diet. I've never heard of this man, actually. So, but being around 40 years and what he talked about. So you said he basically was teaching that you could, or your friend said to you that you could eat lots of potatoes and you could lose the weight. So let's talk about this, because actually it goes to what I was listening to this morning, how food and movement and mindset and sleep and all these factors really are so powerful to heal ourselves and get rid of diseases or pre-diabetic or whatever it may be. It's really like the food you choose, how you move, the sleep you're getting, how you're managing stress, and all these things really, really add up. And I think that's what's so powerful. So let's talk about what you learned.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're whole beings. And like you said, there's mindset, there's nutrition, there's movement, there's all these things. So Dr. John McDougall, along with the work of Dr. Neil Barnard, who is the world's leading expert in diabetes research, and he also teaches at George Washington Medical University. These two doctors were pivotal. And there's so many doctors that I could list off that promote a plant-based diet and have for 30, 40 years and seen so much success. So basically what they teach is that the optimal diet for healing and longevity is a plant-based diet that is high in carbohydrates and low in fat, which was completely the opposite of what I had been doing. Because I had always been doing high protein, which inevitably is higher fat and low carb. So I was terrified to switch, but I was like, It can't get any worse, right? So I basically just started eating lots of plant-based carbohydrates, whole grains, potatoes, lots of beans and other legumes, lots of rice, and then just really watching my fat intake. And these doctors teach that the easiest way to watch your fat intake is to just remove oil. A spray of oil is fine, but just stop like drenching your vegetables in fat, in oil, and that will remove a huge bulk of what's in your diet. And I was like, well, I don't feel like I eat that much fat. But so that's honestly the first thing I focused on. I didn't focus on like whole grain pasta. I was eating white pasta. Okay. So I started with like cereal and pasta and bread and pancakes, but I really watched the fat and I took out oil. I think that first week I lost like 5 or 6 pounds, which is obviously all fat. You're losing a lot of inflammation and you're emptying your intestines because you're eating so much more fiber. But I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And week after week, I was weighing less and less on the scale. I had never experienced weight loss like this ever. Mm-hmm. So what was really fantastic about this whole thing is it was really motivating, one, to see the change in the scale, but then to start feeling better and start seeing my skin clearing up and start feeling like I have more energy. And after 3 months of eating all plant-based, watching my fat intake, and still doing a good job, like I've always liked fruits and vegetables, but I was mostly living off of carbs for sure, because I had been depriving myself of carbs for so long. I was like really enjoying eating them. At the end of like 3 to 4 months, I had lost like 35 pounds. I went back to my doctor and she's like, what have you been doing? She's like, your blood pressure, your triglycerides are perfect. She's like, you have normal blood sugar levels for the first time in 10 years. And you changed it in 3 months and you've lost weight. Like, what are you doing? And so I gave her all these doctors' books. But yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal what a high carbohydrate, low fat, plant-based diet can do.
So it's so fascinating to me because I remember, gosh, I've done so many diets in my life. I'm a little different in this way that I've remained the same size for, gosh, like at least 20 years. Oh, but awesome. And I don't say that to like toot my own horn, but I've always been very mindful how I eat, and I eat very healthy and clean. I'm not one to eat a lot of processed food. And I think that's one thing that needs to be echoed over and over, that processed food in general, like our body does not know how to break that down or digest it properly. So it ruins, creates such havoc on your gut. And pretty much everybody knows that, but they still eat the processed food. So I think first things first, in my personal opinion, is if you're looking at a chart, if the top thing you take out would be processed foods, in my personal opinion, the more whole foods you eat, the better your body is able to operate and get rid of anything that it doesn't want, right? That's one thing. But what I was going to talk about is I used to have the mindset, no oil. Like even when I would go to restaurants, I'd be like, can you cook that without oil and use spray? Or, I would always be so conscious of my fat intake. But years ahead, like to where I am today, and this is what I kind of want to touch on a little bit and go deeper into, because my mindset around it. And when I was like learning, when I was diving into your book, you talk a lot about removing the fat. And I've developed the mindset of actually not being afraid of oil, but the healthy oils like the olive oil, the avocado oil, the healthy fats that actually nourish us, that have health benefits. And I'm really big on health and longevity and all those things. And so I've been actually not afraid of using the olive oil when I cook eggs or cooking other things. And I've just kind of developed that habit of not being afraid of the healthy oils. But when we're talking about losing weight, that's when I feel the conversation with fat, removing or at least eliminating some of the fats that you're adding throughout the day. That's where the needle mover is. Is that what I'm hearing from you correctly?
Yeah, because you're still getting nuts and seeds and avocados. Like I eat lots of nuts and seeds and avocados throughout the day. I just choose, like, I have to make a cut somewhere, right? If I want to enjoy all of my cashews and my almonds and my cashew dressings, and I want to enjoy ample amounts of avocado, like I have to make a cut somewhere, especially for my body. I always say I'm like PTB, prone to barrel. Just, it happens so easily. So I make the cut in oil. It's the easiest for me. And I think people don't realize, like, if you go to bake your own fries, a light spray of oil does amazing things. They still feel awesome, and delicious. Whereas when they have nothing on them, they come out a little dry, But a little spray of oil isn't going to deter anything or slow anything down if you're moderate with it. And it's really all about really just taking a moderate approach to your fat intake, like you said, to move the needle. It's the easiest place. And they've done, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Barbara Rolls. She's a professor at Penn State University. She wrote several books, my favorite being her volumetrics book. And they did all these studies on overweight individuals and healthy, normal weighted individuals. And they did all of these really interesting food studies that I would just love to go more into detail with. But what they found was that if you gave somebody a dish of pasta and, you put toppings, vegetables, and marinara sauce on it, an individual would eat it and get full. Okay. But then what they found is that when they added a tablespoon of olive oil or any oil to the pasta, it did nothing for satiation. It didn't add in satiation, but all you did was add 200 extra calories for no satiation. And what these doctors argue is that oil can be a really refined food that has little nutritional value when you look at the scope of what you're getting in return. So you're getting so many calories and so much fat in turn for very little. There's not a fair exchange of nutrition to what you're taking in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to weight loss, it's like you have to look at where you could cut. That isn't really, if you say adding benefit to your weight loss plan, if you want to say. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I do think that, and actually we'll talk about this moving along, because I do really want people to understand like how to actually get the weight loss, and then also, of course, eliminate possibly some health concerns, and what you teach is mostly focused on that. And, as you said, you still get the healthy fats and you just reduce the serving size, or also you get it in lower calorie bursts, if you want to say, instead of the heavy oils that you add to every single food for cooking. Right. So I think that's great. I actually want to share, because I read this yesterday and I thought it was really great to share, because what's his face? Let me find this right now. I wrote this down and I just want to find where I put it. Sorry. Okay. So you talk about in your book the mechanic of weight loss. And one of the things I looked at on Instagram yesterday, Lane Norton stated that fat gain and loss is determined by fat balance. So with a high fat, low carb, you burn more fat, but you also store more fat. And then when the high carb, low fat, you burn less fat, but you don't store as much fat. And I found that really fascinating when I heard that, because, he's basically saying, don't be so afraid of the carbs. But, it's like, if you eat a ton of fat, you have the potential of storing a lot more fat. And then, on the flip side. So I think that's really great to note. So talking about the mechanics of weight loss, can you explain that more deeply? I know you touched on it a little bit, but yeah. Yeah.
So fat is interesting. So if you read any of Dr. John McDougall's books or Dr. Neil Barnard, who talks a lot about this in his Your Body in Balance book, where he talks about how to balance your body hormones, especially female issues, with a low fat, high carbohydrate diet. these doctors talk about how fat is a storage hormone. So when you consume fat, your body doesn't burn it as a preferred source of fuel, because it's not your body's preferred source of fuel. Carbohydrates are. So your body, like if I eat salmon, the fat from that salmon is going to go straight into storage. It's not going to be converted, because if I'm eating carbs, then my body's going to use the carbs for energy, and it's going to store the fat for an emergency later. And so what was really interesting is that they said if you stick a syringe into your fat somewhere and you pull out fat, if you look at it under a microscope, you can tell what that person eats. Like, oh, this person eats a lot of salmon. This person eats a lot of eggs. This person eats, because it's literally, it's not being converted by your body. It's being stored as fat. And so your body wanting carbohydrates as its fuel source is awesome, because if you don't give it that much fat, it's not storing that much fat, and it's using carbohydrates. And when all weight loss really comes down to a calorie deficit. So when you're eating all of these whole foods, you're filling up on bulk and volume, you feel satisfied, but you're actually at a calorie deficit, because whole foods, like you said, are so good for you. They're full of nutrition, fiber, water, bulk, all these things that trigger satiation in your brain, but they're lower in calories. Whereas if you're eating loads of processed food, they're low in nutrition and high in calories, and you have to eat a lot more to fill up. So when you're consuming all of these whole foods, you're full and you're satisfied, but you're eating less calories than you have been. So your body is burning up that fat that you have stored. And it's a beautiful process, especially when you don't, like, I didn't have to count calories to get to where I am. That was magic for me. And there's nothing wrong with counting calories. I think it's an excellent tool and it helps a lot of people. But this is a great way to manage weight loss without having to count calories.
Amazing. So let's talk about the type of carbohydrates, because I know a lot of people think that when you eat so many, actually, to be honest, I think this way in some regard. Like the carbs I eat are vegetables, plants, low glycemic fruits, and like sweet potatoes. Like I eat the complex carbs opposed to the pasta. Like I personally avoid pasta, but this is I've been trained this way for so long. So I don't need it. I go for like the vegetables to fill me up. I love vegetables. I love filling up on the fiber, and I know how good that is for my digestive tract and whatnot. So let's talk about the carbs that you're saying people should consume, because you are having potatoes, you are having pasta. So what would you say are the safe carbs to have on this type of diet?
So I would say if you're just starting your journey, like pasta is still a great thing to have in terms of calorie density, right? So it's still low on the calorie density scale, and it actually takes a lot longer for your body to break down. So satiation, it's higher in satiation than like a white potato, because a white potato, gets burned up. Actually, white potatoes, I have to go back on that. It's better than like white bread. White bread is going to take no time to digest, and then it spikes your blood sugar like crazy. But pasta takes a while to digest because it's so dense. Now, I think that if your goal is weight loss and you're already a healthy eater like you, keep doing what you're doing and focus on eating those vegetables and those whole complex carbohydrates. But if you're somebody that has a more significant amount of weight to lose, I would say 20 or 30 pounds or more, and you're coming off of a standard American diet, like going from Taco Bell runs straight into, the way I eat now isn't going to happen. Like there has to be a transition period. So you can totally lose weight eating pancakes that you have made with white flour. Do I recommend it? No, because one, it's higher in calories and it has no fiber, no nutrition. It's not going to help keep you satiated longer. So I think obviously you always want to choose the better form of carbohydrates. Don't go for white bread. Please go for whole grain bread, sprouted if you're going to have bread, because again, there's more nutrition. It doesn't spike your blood sugar like crazy, and it adds to satiation, and it's lower in calories.
Mm-hmm.
That
And you mentioned, and this is what's key. I really want the people that are listening to this episode. This is for the people that are trying to lose weight. And so I'm coming from my perspective of how I've ate for a while, but it's become a lifestyle for me. But I know I really want to talk to the people that are in the position that need to lose, let's say 50, even 10 pounds, but 15 pounds and above, and also maybe address some of those health issues they're having. And I know you're the perfect person to speak about this because of what you've done with your own health and your family's health. So, so if somebody's starting off, what would an example of, and let's say somebody is coming from, yes, they were more conscious of their health, but they were still eating the processed foods and whatnot. So they're going through this transition of starting off this new diet approach that you have, and that you have a new book out called Plantifully Lean, and recipes and all that. So somebody's starting off, what is their plate going to look like? If they're going to build out their plate, what would be like the beginning steps to get started?
I would say, and so I put the 3 different plate options in my book because they're kind of different depending on where you are in your weight loss journey. So let's say you have 10 to 20 pounds to lose. The number one thing to start looking at is high fats. So, okay, stop cooking in oil, start spraying. Stop with the nut butters. They're so good.
So good.
Nut butter is so good, but they're so insanely high in calorie density. They're so high and so low in satiation. So I would say remove the oil and remove the nut butters. Go for like your powdered peanut butter. That's a lot lower in fat and calories, and use that on something when you want it. Next, I would say is go straight to the 50-50 plate, where you just by visual volume fill half your plate with non-starchy vegetables and eat those first at every meal. Breakfast, you don't have to do that. You could fill half your plate with berries. That would be great, and eat those first. And what that is going to do is it's going to allow you to still eat the same volume of food for way less calories, because you removed half of what you would have normally filled your plate with, and you filled it with non-starchy vegetables. Not only are you adding like enormous amounts of fiber, nutrition, but you're adding tons of volume, and it's going to help keep you full a lot longer. And if you have that first plate and you're hungry 15 minutes later, have another plate, but build it the same way and always start with your vegetables first. So hands down, that is the biggest tip I can give people, is to cut back on the fat and start filling half your plate full of non-starchy vegetables, and don't cover them in oil. Like, make a dressing out of my book, make the cheese sauce. That's what I'm like most famous for on the internet for is my cheese sauce. People love it. Yeah. So I always have it made in my fridge. I cover my broccoli in it. Broccoli is amazing. Broccoli will keep you full forever when you combine it with something else. It just will, and it will clean you out. And yes, there's an adjustment period to all of the fiber that you're going to be consuming. But those are the 2 biggest tips that will start moving the needle immediately.
That's so great. Can you give an example of, I'm sure a lot of people know what non-starchy vegetables are, but what's maybe a vegetable that people are confused which camp it sits in?
Okay, so peas and carrots. So peas and carrots, people always want to put on the non-starchy side, but they're actually a starch, and they're a lot higher in calorie density. Now, if we're talking like a sprinkle of peas that are mixed in with your non-starchy vegetables, then you're fine. That can be, you know what I'm saying? But if you're going to have like half a plate full of peas and then a half a plate full of potatoes, well, you just had a plate full of starch. So peas and carrots, starch side.
Great to know. Okay, so let's talk about protein, because this is where, so I am not plant-based, but I eat a lot of, I'm big on vegetables, and when I choose my meats, they're very clean, grass-fed, grass finished, and organic and all the things. But let's talk about protein on a plant-based diet, because that's been my hardest thing to switch over to
Yeah.
plant-based, because and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, is having that adequate protein, because as you get older, protein is super key to, number one, maintain muscle, and then
Mhm.
also it's the most satiating food. So what would you say for proteins on a plant-based diet? What are you going for? And then also, uh, how do you ensure you maintain your protein in a plant-based diet?
Yeah. So protein is the number one question, hands down, that I get. And that I think anybody on a plant-based diet gets is, how do you get enough protein? And what was really interesting, and I encourage anybody that is interested in learning more about protein and our requirements and all that, to go check out Dr. Neil Barnard on Instagram. He's got a wonderful podcast that can be watched on YouTube as well, called The Exam Room, where he has lots of guests on there that talk about protein. And so he, along with all of these plant-based doctors, said that the actual requirements for protein are a lot lower than we are sold that they are. So they brought up an interesting point, saying that, have you ever heard of a protein deficiency? Like, you have never gone into the doctor and been diagnosed with an actual protein deficiency, because the only place it really exists are in countries where there's famine and there's real malnutrition happening. So they argue that the requirements are actually a lot lower than we think they are.
Can
So
I interject there? So this is
yes,
one of the
go
most
ahead.
controversial subjects there
It
is
is. I
today.
know. I know.
Uh,
It's so controversial.
yeah. So it's, I think when it comes to all this stuff, it's informing yourself, doing your own research,
Yeah.
trying things out, what works for your body, and
Mhm.
trying it out for some time to see the effects of it. Because I had,
Exactly.
like, for example, I had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on my show, and she is a hard, not believer, that's the wrong word, but she stands highly behind protein, and she
Sure.
has shared this controversy for some time. So it's, as you share this, I think it's so important for people just to listen to people, do your own research, and
Yep.
find what works for you, because I know there's a lot of controversy. So, but go on. I didn't mean to
There is.
interrupt, but I just
Yes.
wanted to
No.
add
And
that. Yeah.
that's like, and you're absolutely right. The best thing, and this is what I tell people all the time, is educate yourself,
Yes.
because you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I totally agree with that. So where are we at?
So you were saying we don't need as much protein
Yeah,
as
yeah,
they
yeah.
actually say. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, 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 that's okay. So I came from so I started, I was always having a ton of protein. Like, after I'd work out, I'd have my protein shake, lots of clean meats. I was eating grass-fed meats, all these things. And I personally was having so many of these health issues. I was having kidney issues as well. So, and that's one of the things that these doctors bring up, is elevated kidney enzymes, all sorts of other things that I was personally experiencing.
Yeah.
So when I moved to a plant-based diet, I just decided not to focus on protein. However, you're going to get protein from everything. And it's argued that it is more bioavailable. And what's interesting is that the biggest mammals on the planet consume only plants. And so they're getting enough protein, and then we're eating their tissue. And so why not skip the animal and go straight to the source? Okay. So I'm just going to talk from my experience, because this is a
Yeah.
huge, huge topic. So like you said, I always say, you know what, here's these doctors, go check it out, try it, see how you feel. So I personally have had zero trouble putting on muscle and changing my figure. And I don't think about protein at all. Like, it doesn't even come up. for me.
Mm.
I don't make sure I'm eating this many servings of beans a day, any of this. And I'm pretty muscular and I've been able to maintain that. I'm also 40. So I
I was
think
just going to ask your age because that's
maybe,
good to know, right? Yes.
yeah, yeah. And so a lot of people are like, well, but how old you are. I'm like, well, I'm not, because Instagram, you always look better. You always post like the best picture, right? So I look younger on Instagram.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I have two kids. I'm 40 and I have had no trouble maintaining or putting on muscle. And that has been really great. But if it's something that you want to focus on, oh my gosh, you can get so much protein in beans and lentils and then combine them with, broccoli that has a ton of protein in it. So it's really not something, in my opinion, that needs to be worried about.
Yeah. Talking about this, I just thought about this because I once did like if you want to say a cleanse type of diet where it was
Mhm.
plant-based and I followed, certain recipes and we were having lentil burgers or uh, black bean burgers. And let me just tell you, so gassy, sorry.
Yeah.
TMI. But for those that actually have, because when you start to consume a lot of fiber, you can have
Mhm.
uh, gassy effect. So do you
Yeah.
recommend any supplements to help with that? Especially when somebody starts a new diet, there's going to be, your body's going to respond to it. And that might be the
There's an
response.
adjustment period.
So
Yeah,
do
no.
you recommend anything in that case, just out of
Yeah.
curiosity?
Yeah, and I hear people send me messages and they're like, "I'm so sorry that I'm even asking about this," but yeah, everybody deals with it, especially when they're switching over. So the thing that I have found that's the best is a papaya enzyme. And I can't remember the brand, but you just go into the health food stores and it's a chewable, like
Mhm.
after dinner mint papaya enzyme. And so after you've eaten your meal, you just chew it
Great.
like a little candy. And that's really helpful. I've heard people say that there's something called Beano
Yeah, I've
but
had that. Yeah.
okay, but I don't, for the vegans out there, I don't know that that's vegan. I've heard that it isn't. I haven't looked at it, but if you're just, if you need something, you need something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good to know. Okay. So, what was that? Oh, yeah. So, a lot of people and I think this is really important to mention. So, a lot of people, when they switch to plant based diets, they're thinking, okay, I'll go to the frozen section and I'll get that plant based burger or order this
Yeah.
veggie burger. A lot of those things that are packaged, if you want to say, are
Mhm.
processed. And
Yeah.
so, you're still
Yeah.
causing havoc to your digestive system.
Yeah.
And I want people to hear that. And that's why I think your book is so great because you got all the recipes there. And to my knowledge, they're really simple recipes. So
They're
it's
very
nothing that,
simple.
yeah. So can you touch on that? Because I think that's so important for people to know. Like so many people think they're doing something healthier by getting these veggie
Yeah.
burgers, plant-based burgers, the Impossible Burger, but they're actually more
Well,
processed than your grass-fed meat.
yeah. And you're spending more money. So it's more expensive and you're still consuming highly processed food. So I hear all the time from people that find me and they're like, I switched to plant-based diet and I gained 15 pounds. And then you dig into it and they're like, okay, well, what does your diet look like? And it's like you said, well, there's a lot of vegan processed food, a lot of fast food, a lot of going out to restaurants. Well, all of that adds up, especially if you're looking to lose weight. You have to have a more targeted approach. So I always say, look, a little bit of the plant-based meat crumbles, a little bit of the cheese here and there isn't going to kill anybody and it helps in the transition for sure. But don't rely on these foods as a form of actually as don't rely on these foods at all as a major part of your diet. Instead, rely on them when you're in a pinch, when you're traveling, when you just can't make something happen. Okay, but otherwise there's just no remedy for health and well-being than whole unprocessed foods.
Absolutely. And I'm such a
No.
big, I'm such a big believer in that, hands down. in any diet you do, whole foods all the way.
Yeah.
So yeah. Uh, so I was going to say, what are some, because I know you share in the book the benefits of going plant based. I mean, you've
Mhm.
kind of already touched on some of them. Obviously, we know this has helped your weight loss journey.
Yeah.
It's also helped you lower your chance of being diabetic and also heart disease and all these
Mhm.
things. But what are some other benefits that you share in the book that are really something that people should consider of switching to plant based in general?
Yeah. So my favorite is longevity. So I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Buettner and his book, The Blue Zones.
Yep.
So he's incredible. I'm like such a huge fan of him. So he traveled all over the world for years studying these pockets of people all across the globe that live well into their hundreds, disease free. And they don't die of disease. They die quick, peaceful deaths well into their hundreds. And what he found across all these blue zones across the globe is that they all eat primarily plant-based diets. Nobody's vegan. None of them are completely vegan, but they do eat mostly plant-based, and they only consume a very small amount of meat or fish or eggs, but it's like maybe once a week. So that was profound. He also found that the most robust people were in Nicoya, Costa Rica, and they ate the most fruit of everybody. What he also found was that across all of these people groups, they all consumed about a cup of legumes a day, which is, beans and lentils are incredible for you. So that really stood out to me. And this is somebody who wasn't trying to prove plant-based diets or push that agenda. He was just studying these different groups and then found that they all lived the same way in terms of diet. So that to me is like the biggest standout.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing you talk about, because I know diabetes ran in your family, and you talk
Yeah.
about insulin resistance. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain for anybody that doesn't understand insulin resistance and why this matters, but what is other factors that contribute to insulin resistance?
Okay, so this is where I love Dr. Neil Barnard, and he has an incredible lecture on YouTube. If you just look up Dr. Neil Barnard and reversing diabetes, he does an amazing lecture on this. And this transformed my understanding, because my understanding was I eat carbs, it turns to sugar, sugar stays in my bloodstream, and then that causes all the problems, right? So what he explained is how biologically that's not even scientific. He said, so our cells have receptors in them for sugar. And what our body, our brain needs to function and have energy is sugar, which is why diabetics, when they're on these low carb diets, they just go crazy, like have these crazy, crazy cravings for carbohydrates. Well, anybody on a low carb diet, but especially when people are really trying to avoid carbs, the intense cravings are because your brain and your body really need it to function. Okay, so your cells have these receptors for sugar where they can convert the sugar into energy. So what happens is when we consume fat, the fat fills our bloodstream and then it clogs the receptors in our cells. So now the sugar cannot get into our cells and it stays in our bloodstream. And that in effect causes high blood sugar, which starts damaging tissues, damaging organs, all of these things. So when you start cutting back on the fat and clearing out your cells and eating the carbohydrates, then they're getting into your bloodstream and your blood sugar is coming down. So what happened for me when the first 2 weeks, I had really high blood sugar because I was eating all of these carbs, but I still had a lot of fat stored in my cells. And it can take your body a few weeks to get rid of. And Dr. Barnard has an amazing book on reversing diabetes as well, where he describes all of this. So it can take your body a few weeks to flush the fat that it's that it has stuck in its cells. And then the sugar starts making it in to your cells and everything starts working the way it should and your blood sugar comes down. So for the first 2 weeks, I had high blood sugar and I was freaking out, but I was seeing the scale move. So I'm going to stick this out because I am finally losing weight. So we'll deal with blood sugar later. But yeah, then after a few weeks, my blood sugar started looking perfect. I hadn't seen blood sugar like this, like I said, in a decade. So it's really simple and it's the fat. And so even if you want to like have a ton of avocado or something, maybe have it on your salad. Don't have it on your potato. Like if you're talking about like ample amounts, just so that your cells can stay clear so your body can get the sugar in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, and I'll look for that video and include in the show notes so people could dig further into this. Cause again, it's great to inform ourselves, right?
Yes.
Especially if that's a concern for anybody with diabetes, and which it's very concerning. A lot of people are either pre-diabetic or dealing with diabetes. So that's so great to know. So let's talk about, before I move into the most important piece that I want to talk about, and I mentioned this offline, but just to like wrap this with a bow. And of course, I want people to get your book and learn more about this and find your recipes. You have so many recipes in here. And this is for getting, losing your weight and curing possibly some problems you have with your health because of the weight gain. So how does somebody maintain the weight that's lost? Do they continue this same plate regimen, or what do you do to maintain your weight?
So that's a really good question. So for me personally, I continue to use like the 50-50 plate. It's now just a part of life. I always have and you're basically just eating more fruits and vegetables is all you're doing, right? So with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I have breakfast, I have a huge serving of fresh fruit, and then I'll have something else. Lunch and dinner, same thing. I continue to fill half of my plate with vegetables and, eat my starch and then have my sauces and dressings. You can't go back to the way you used to eat. You just can't. It's a slippery slope, and we all know that weight gain comes on stronger and faster than it did the first time. So I like people to learn, because I'm a comfort food girl. So I put a ton of comfort food recipes in this cookbook, but cleaned up. So I still want to have egg rolls. I still want to have pizza. I still want to have nachos. They're just healthier. And so you can still have that. So that's how I maintain my weight, is by not allowing myself to feel deprived. Because if you say, I'm not going to eat any junk food, well, one, that's like, we're lying to ourselves, because it's going to happen. You're going to go on vacation and you're going to be like, I just want that Alfredo pasta. That's fine. But you have to make sure that you feel satisfied. And for me, that comes in the form of being able to eat pancakes and waffles and pizza, just having them in a cleaned up version, and always using the 50-50 plate, which always ensures that I'm eating tons of low calorie foods that are the highest in nutrition, which is a win for everyone. Now, if somebody, usually my men don't normally need to go to the plate building method, because men can decide to drink one beer with dinner instead of two and lose 15 pounds in 2 weeks. So it's just not fair. But so men don't generally need to move down to the plate building method. If they just, cut back on the fat and start eating more whole foods, it tends to happen. Now, I do have men that use the plate building method, and some women, not a lot, that experience losing more weight than they want to, which I'm like, how? So if you're doing, for example, the 50-50 plate and you get to your weight loss goal, but oh no, week 2, week 3 comes and you've lost more than you wanted to lose, and you're not, you don't want to look that thin, then don't fill your plate half full of vegetables. Fill it, a third full of vegetables. All you have to do is either eat a little bit more carbs and a little less veggies, or add a little more healthy fat. And your body will, if you have that problem. And if you have that problem, please don't rub it in my face. I
That's so
can't take
great.
it.
So great. Well, let's talk about what I said as I believe the foundation of creating lasting change. Because I think, even though this is, going over weight loss and really getting to hopefully a healthy weight, the only way you have sustainable results, I believe, as the foundation of all that is a couple things. And it's kind of wrapped up all into one thing. So it's basically your identity, your beliefs, the stories you
Mhm.
tell yourself, and the identity you create for yourself
Mhm.
or that you've been living with. It's the identity you live with. And until you address that and really cultivate self love and feel that you are
Mhm.
worthy to have a healthy body, to have your health, to take care of your health, until you feel you are worthy of that, I don't believe your results will be sustainable.
Right.
What's your opinion on that? I think I just lost you for a second.
No, I got all of that. I 100% agree.
I
I
don't see your
wrote that
video
whole,
for some reason, but
oh, can you hear me though?
I could hear you. So if
Okay.
you're watching on YouTube and possibly her video is not on, I'm sorry, but don't worry, we hear you. That's what's most important.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I've got that mountain internet,
That's okay.
doesn't
You're good.
always work. So, mindset, self love is at the core of transformation. It just is. And that's why I wrote that whole section in the book about you needing to address your beliefs about yourself, your beliefs about what you're capable of in order to make lasting change. I always tell my people, look, self love empowers lasting change. When we hate ourselves, when we don't think, we hate our bodies, we hate the way we look, we hate the way we feel, when we're in this adversarial position with ourselves, it's impossible to better ourselves. It's impossible to better our health when we're in this tug of war. And like you said, like what we believe about ourselves is the results that we're going to attain. And so I like to address that in the book.
Sorry, you're
Oh, can you hear
breaking up
me?
a bit.
Oh no. Can you hear me?
You're okay. Yes, now I
Okay.
can.
So in the book, I really wanted to address the importance of learning to love yourself. You can absolutely love and value yourself while you work on the things you want to change. Because I feel like there's this idea out there that self love means that you have to accept the status quo. And that's completely wrong in my opinion. And I feel like you're cheating yourself of your potential if you want to believe that way. I feel like if you can learn to love and accept who you are and believe that you are worth taking care of, that you can absolutely change what you want to about your health, about your life, about your body, your relationships, anything. And so I always tell people, like, and I go over this in the book, like if you start by making a list of the things that you can appreciate about yourself, because a lot of people can't start with a list of things that they love about themselves. And I know when I started my journey, I didn't love a whole lot about myself. I didn't love the way I looked. I didn't love a lot. But so what I did is I started with things I could appreciate about myself. Well, okay, I can appreciate that I had two healthy babies. Like this body was strong enough to give me two healthy babies. I appreciate that the last time I had the flu, I didn't die because I thought I was going to die, but I didn't die. So you make your list of the things that you can appreciate. And if every day you sit with yourself, and I tell everybody in the book to hold themselves, and there's actually science behind this, which I love. When you put your hand on your heart, it releases endorphins. And so it releases this really good euphoric feeling while you're sitting with yourself, telling yourself the things that you appreciate about yourself, right? And then you want to pick a few things that you do want to believe about yourself and that you intend on believing one day. You're not writing them down because you currently feel that way. You intend on feeling that way. And these are your affirmations, that I am healthy, I can finish anything I start. And that was one of my affirmations because I always had this belief that like I'm a quitter. I just like I give up. Like I'll do good for a little bit and then I fall off the wagon. So I had to get rid of that because that is so toxic. Because if I believe that I never finish anything I start, well, that's my result. So it's really just a process of appreciating yourself and starting to build a new identity around your health and well-being. And when you build that identity, it's interesting how your brain works because then your brain starts making sure that you're doing those things so that it can confirm its identity.
Absolutely.
Do you know, it's amazing. It's amazing the way our brain works. So it's simple. It's easy. Is it fast? No. But if you'll sit with yourself every day, if you'll commit to yourself to appreciate yourself and to speak good things about yourself, you'll realize that that appreciation slowly grows into self-respect. And self-respect grows into a deep self-love. And once you've reached that place, there is nothing that can stop you.
Oh gosh, like complete mic drop on that. That was so beautifully wrapped with a bow with what you just said. And I think that's so true. And I love to just give people, anybody listening to this, the permission to do this exercise, to instead of, if you have a hard time loving yourself right now in the body you have or whatever health issues you're having, is instead write down, what do you appreciate? And I think you just nailed it just by saying, like, I was so healthy that I could carry babies to full term, deliver them natural or wherever, whatever it may be for you, but like that you were able to be healthy enough to bring a baby to full term. Like that's pretty awesome. So
it is. It's
so write down what you appreciate. And I think, as you said, the more you appreciate, that will turn into obviously what the actions you will take towards that identity you see for yourself. When you cast that vision, like, I am somebody that finishes what I start. I am somebody that is healthy and thriving and feeling good in my body. When you cast that vision of your future self, you're able to then at least know the actions you need to take daily that will add up to get to that end result. And then that self-respect over time will add to self-love. And I completely 1000% agree. And I think that is such a great way to end the episode, is just with that conclusion, like, do that exercise. And I think that's a great way to start, and then grab the book and then get started on your plan. I think that's amazing. Well, so just to top this all off, where can people best find you? I know you provide so much value on your socials and YouTube and all that.
Yeah, so I'm known as Plantiful Kiki on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Instagram is where you'll see the most often. And then I try to, expand on that on YouTube. But otherwise, you can also check me out on my website. I have a lot of free resources there. I'm at plantifulkiki.com. And then you will see me in stores here soon.
Yes, so exciting. Thank you so much. So just to close off, and I know you might have said some of this, but let's see how you conclude this answer. So I always ask my guests the same question. So if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned along your vast journey and through everything you've been through, if you felt somebody needed to hear something right now, a piece of wisdom, what would that be right now?
It's always the same. That gratefulness is the key to happiness. And if you can find gratitude for yourself, for the people around you, for what you have, life becomes more and more beautiful, because truly gratitude is the key to happiness.
So beautifully said. Love it. This has been such an honor, Kiki. I so appreciate everything you shared. And thank you for sharing your resources as well, which I'll try to include all of them in the show notes, because I do think that's great to back it up with the research. And also, of course, I'll plug in your book. Everybody go grab it and get cooking with some new recipes and change your plate. So thank you again for everything you shared today.
Yes,
appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
So welcome.